and welcome back. Happy Monday. And to any of you out there watching it, happy Monday or whatever day it is when you see this. I'm Gage.
And I'm Will.
And this is the third True Nature conversation, coming at you with the intention to explore anything that comes up, but starting with how do these things, what we've been talking about, the true nature explorations, how do they get put into practice? How do we make a difference? What is actionable about this? How do we bring all of these deep inquiries into a physical manifestation that's actually useful, not only for ourselves, but for the world around us?
Yeah, and the first thing that off the bat comes up as you ask that question for me is sort of points to our style in these conversations and what we're embodying, which for me is a very intuitive, sort of organic, unplanned conversation, just an unplanned way of being, very spontaneous. You know, we don't really plan these conversations at all. We just sort of show up and see what comes to mind in each moment. And to me, that's in many ways a result of the work that I've done around exploring my true nature and realizing like I always have everything I need in each moment. And the previous way of being for me was like, you know, planning things out and trying to figure things out. And like with that came a lot of nervous energy. Like, what if I mess up, or what if I'm not ready? And so putting this work into action for me creates a lot of freedom, and just being able to show up and have sort of a trust and a faith in life and myself to just show up as needed and without any pressure or need to perform in a certain way.
So the two words that stood out in that were, to me, were trust and faith, as well as just the intuitive unfolding of it. But what did trust and faith mean to you? And for someone who is used to the planning and making sure that everything is set up so that they can perform well, how do they get past the initial leap that it takes to, all right, I'm just gonna trust this today and show up with the faith that life will put anything that I need to do or anything that I need in front of me? Because that can be scary.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't want to, I think there's a lot of value in planning, and I do often, like today, I have most of my day planned. And so not knocking planning at all, but the distinction is planning from a place of like, I need something to do and I need to know how to do it, versus like, I don't need this plan. I'm going to create this plan to add some structure to my life, but totally okay going off the script. And I have full faith that however things unfold, I will be okay with them. So in that, I think the trust for me means just sort of like an ease and a unwavering sense of it's going to be okay and I'm going to be okay. And really this understanding that my well-being doesn't depend on what happens out there. Therefore, I'm okay. And I trust that whatever happens, I'll be okay. You know, my true nature will be untouched and okay. And that is that is sort of the trust and the faith that I'm speaking to.
So leaning into
And I'd
your
also like to
own-
explore, I'd also like to explore like that leap, how to get there. But first I want to hear sort of your, reflection of that and what comes up for you around faith and trust.
What I heard inside of your sharing was just like a leaning into your own resiliency, like knowing, and not just like a nervous, like I guess it'll be all right with however this unfolds, but just like setting a strong intention for the day of like everything that happens, it's gonna be okay, regardless of if this plan or if this structured intention actually carries out the way that I hoped it would. It's gonna be all right, not as a self-assurance or not as like a way to try and comfort yourself, but as a knowing that like whatever it is, I can absolutely handle this. And even if you can't handle it, being okay with not being able to handle it. That kind of feeling to me comes with, like we talked about in the previous conversations, just like the joy talk that we had a little while ago about like you tap into joy through an opening into the appearance of life that is in front of you at the moment. And so that opening into is to me what resilience comes from, not being like tough and knowing that you can do everything, but just knowing that whatever it is that comes, you are capable and willing of opening into it.
Mm-hmm. And to expand on that trust and that faith, something else that comes up for me is like just realizing how much intelligence is in life and in reality, and like the fact that this giant / microscopic rock called Earth is just in this perfect orbit and spinning the exact distance it needs to from the sun, and then all of nature is just in this balance that allows life to unfold. And then like internally in each breath, my body is taking in air, pulling the oxygen out of it, passing it on to my blood. My heart, is beating every second, and like spreading that blood throughout my body, and that exchange of nutrients. And like all of this is happening without any awareness most of the time of my mind. And yet the mind sometimes like thinks it's all going to come crashing down in any moment. And the realization is like, it's been going in some ways perfectly for billions of years. And to think that I'm going to make a mistake and it's all just going to come crashing down is absurd from that perspective. And that also gives me a great trust in life that it will continue unfolding as it has been for millions of years.
So if in relying on the intelligence of life, the complications, I guess, of attempting to interfere with that intelligence seem to fall away. So what do you think it is that brings us away from that intelligence or the trust in it if it feels so readily apparent, if you are opening into the situation in front of you and trusting?
Yeah, what brings us away from that intelligence? To me, like my direct experience is that these thoughts in this mind is what clouds the space of that intelligence. And so somewhere along the development of me or of this entity, like me was born, me being the identification with the mind and the body, and seeing that as separate from life and the intelligence that is everywhere.
Mm.
And so that little identity, you could call it the ego, starts to distance itself from the intelligence and thinks like, I know best, or I have to figure this out, or I've got to get this right, and make something of this. And if I mess up, it's all going to come crashing down. So to me, it's that, and we've explored this before, and it seems to always come back to this for me. It's like that identification with the form takes us away from the almighty intelligence.
And the second question that comes in that same string is what does action look like from that space of like being separate or the ego trying to micromanage all of the movements of the grand intelligence? And what does action look like if it's done from the pure space of that trusting and flowing with that intelligence?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We sort of looked at this a little bit in the first conversation. It seems like when, again, I'll just use myself as an example. When I'm acting from the ego and micromanaging, like you said, well, micromanaging would be a perfect example of when I'm acting from the ego. I'm trying to control the outcomes. I'm trying to get my hands around life and my sort of daily actions. And I would like to think of some examples that sort of, some examples around this, but it generally looks like a tension, like clinging, like this has to happen a certain way for me to be happy. I think, so I mean, that would be acting from the ego, and then acting from the intelligence is more of just a easy, relaxed, spacious, like, like an intuitive, moment by moment decision making of like, okay, in this moment, based on what I'm being presented with, this is the choice that is being made in the space that I am. And in each moment, there will be a new opportunity to choose how to show up, and just sort of riding the wave of experience.
Yeah.
And I'd like to hear your,
that come up inside of that are like the difference between an outcome focus, which is what I heard through the first, like if I'm working from ego, it has to happen a certain way for me to be satisfied with it. So it gets this kind of outcome focus, and it's always on the end goal, versus the intuitive moment to moment unfolding is just like a total immersion in the process, where in the same way that you, in that full trust of life, would not feel like you were separate from the life intelligence, there's like an inseparable quality between me and the action or the circumstance that's unfolding. So it's just an absolute harmonious flowing of the fulfillment of action in the moment. And then the second piece of the sharing came out to me as reactivity versus responsiveness. Um, Working from ego, I know in me, it tends to make me more irritable. I get a little impatient sometimes. My mind will start to go somewhere else if I'm in an uncomfortable situation. It's like, oh, I don't want to be here. Get all the mental grumblings and then start to react in different ways than I would if I was actually paying attention to what was going on in front of me. Whereas if I'm fully relaxed into the flow of intelligence at any given moment. And I don't necessarily mean relaxed in the way of like, I don't want to do anything. Sometimes that comes with just like an incredible surge of energy. Um, but that energy doesn't feel urgent at any point in time. And it feels very much like you said, like a decision making process where like something happens, you can listen into the moment that's going on and then respond. It's sort of actually entirely like a dance project. It's just you move, your body does something, and then you respond to the way that your body moves. Or externally, if you have a partner, then your partner makes a move, and you make a choice to go with that move. The entirety of life feels much more like an artistic kind of creativity rather than a rather dead sort of just get this done.
Mhm. Yeah, what I hear is like ego is more rigid and sharp edges and dead, and life force, intelligence, whatever, non-ego is just more of like a flow, a creative, like dynamic energy.
Mm.
And I want to try to sort of like in this conversation demonstrate what I'm like when I'm operating from the ego. So when I'm in that space of the ego, I'm not really hearing what you're saying. I'm not really listening. I'm kind of over here thinking like, what am I going to say next? Like maybe if I had notes, I'd be like, okay, where should I go from here? And like not tuned in to you and what's really in front of me and maybe even the body, versus when I am in this, when I am, relaxed into the space around the ego and operating from that, I'm like really tuned in to what you're saying. I'm not so absorbed in my thinking. And, there's just an ease, and I like sort of trust that the next piece of wisdom will flow out of this body and mind. And if it doesn't, I'm totally cool sitting in the silence too.
Mm. And so now that we've found a little bit, or at least for the moment, discovered or explored a little bit of a distinction or discernment between what action looks like or feels like more so from both spaces, how can we bring this into like specific context? So I know my tendency a lot of the time, and the tendency that I've seen in our conversations, unless there's a very specific context around it, tend to get into huge abstraction. And so in the context of the cultural situation that we're in right now, or the global situation that we're in right now, with all of its seeming urgency and polarization and all of those things, what and the question is there but not fully formed at the moment, but what can conscious responsive action look like in this world, and what forms would that take on for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's very well said, and we do tend to go way abstract, and I would like to bring it into like, okay, what does this look like in a day-to-day actual situation, and how does it make a difference? So for me, I mean, this conversation is an example of how to make a difference. And for me, conversation in general is really important right now. I think one of the biggest challenges, I guess call it a problem, we're seeing right now is like a divide. So for example, just like, you know, Democrats versus Republicans, there's like seemingly two very different circles that are so like in their own worlds that there's like no integration between the two parts. And so it's just creating this back and forth energy that just creates tension and like just sort of a fight. It's like a never ending argument between one side and the other. And so my question is like, how do we get, you know, this Trump supporter and this Biden supporter to realize we're really working for the same purpose here? We're really trying to maximize workability and well-being in this country and perhaps in this world. And we may have some different perspectives and views, but ultimately we're on the same team here. And so if I was to embody this spaciousness, this like big, you know, the spaciousness and not the ego with, let's say, a Trump supporter and a Biden supporter in front of me, I think it would look like being, you know, first of all, listening to both of them and giving them my full attention and saying like, I hear your perspective, I hear your concerns, you know, I see you, and let's, you know, inviting them into a conversation. Let's talk about this. And then really showing them that I care to hear what they have to say. And I'm not trying to convince them of anything at all. I have no real agenda other than, you know, maximizing happiness here. And so I think when people feel that energy, they can kind of let their guard down and stop the argument and trying to be right or trying to convince the other person to be like, oh, this is someone who actually is on my team, is on my side, is willing to listen. And from that space, we can, you know, put our minds together and see, you know, how to move forward from here. And I think collaboration, integration, bringing the two into one is what I see would make the biggest difference at this point in time.
So how do you generate that willingness? The willingness of people to engage with the one that is the other. If we're us, then how do we create the willingness to engage with them?
Again, I think it's inviting them into conversations. And that can be, you know, a one-on-one conversation, or that can be a large online or on social media conversation. And just saying like, yeah, I don't know what that would look like on like a social media platform, but that's where my mind goes. Like maybe saying like, just saying the intention out loud, like, hey, I'm showing up here because I want to make a difference. I want to help you. I want to understand you. I want to hear you. And please reach out to me and let me know, you know, how I can support you right now. And once, I mean, that the first step is sort of engaging with someone or some group of people and bringing them into a space or putting yourself in their space and, really genuinely having that intention to make a difference. And then through conversations, through making sure they feel heard, they feel seen, getting sort of in that space with them, dancing a little bit, and then collaborating to bring them to or just open them up to like a feeling of safety where they can, they feel okay, they feel heard, and then they're not just reacting to your perspective. But does that make sense? I'm sort of just, I don't really know where I'm going with this. I'm just exploring it.
That makes sense to me. And there's a recurring theme that I've heard throughout this conversation and a little bit in some of our other conversations, being intentionality. And that I think fits as another kind of principle of action in this way, and how to stay grounded inside of action, whether it's just in personal endeavors or in collective endeavors. It's just, and again, not to create like a rigid, this has to go this way or else I'm just going to be torn apart. But creating just an intention, like you said, coming into a space with the intention to make a difference. Or an ongoing intention that I've had for a while is just to cultivate and share a love for life and the people who live it. But just having some kind of intention or like bedrock, and it can change. It doesn't have to stay the same all the time. But I know I've seen a lot in the circles that I'm a part of about building intentional communities and all of that kind of stuff. And I've seen a lot of those thrive, and I've seen a lot of them fail. And I think the ones that fail, like the idea of the intentional community, but not everybody commits to the intentional living part. Whereas the ones that thrive, whether it's a small intentional community or just a little city that works super well together and seems to be very collaborative and involved community, is just having that sort of intentional living component where everybody is in some way or another involved with an intention to just the betterment of everyone's well-being.
Yeah, and in that I also hear like taking personal responsibility, like rather than blaming or pointing the finger, like taking responsibility and say like, I have something to do with this. I have something to do with the current situation, and making sure to watch myself and see when I'm perpetuating or adding to the tension that's we're seeing manifest on a large scale. So like, in all this work I've done, there's still a part of me that gets into arguments and not saying arguments are bad, but there's times where I'm going against my intention, or I'm stepping out of line, and maybe that's manifesting in like relational conflict, or further dividing some relationship. So I think a big key is saying like, I have something to do with this, and I'm committed to noticing whenever I'm acting from the ego, and bringing myself back, and like taking a step back and saying like, I need to stay grounded in order to really make a difference, rather than acting from this, self-righteous ego and perpetuating this back and forth divide. And from, I think, starting with that, then sort of spreading out to the people that are closest to me, our circles, our communities, and saying like, I also am a part of this family, this friend group, this, whatever the community is. And I take responsibility for some of the behavior that's going on in these circles. And I'm committed to making a difference here through
Mm.
conversation, through just embodying a space of loving life. And, if everyone were able to take that responsibility, I think we could really make a lot of progress in cleaning up some of the messes that we're creating.
Mm. Yeah, a practice that has helped me with not pushing away the things that I see as like, wow, people really shouldn't act like that. Whether it's wars or just like small town crime or the large scale polarization that we have at the moment, or like the riots and stuff that happen on both sides of the political spectrum, um, is for me to recognize that I have the capability to do all of those things. Anything that I can see and be like, we need to change that, is something that I could do. Like I could be that person in that position doing that exact same thing. Regardless of what it is, I do have the capacity for that. I may not actively make the choice to do that, but I do have the capacity for it. And in like accepting that and bringing it into myself, kind of embracing that quality in some way, um, that helps me to move past maybe the initial reactive judgment that may come out from seeing something that, like somebody treating someone in a way that I don't think that human beings should be treated, or seeing like the way that our legal system is set up, or seeing the way that any of the various kind of systematic oppressions or mistreatments of people on small or large scales have been set up. Just recognizing that I do have the capacity for that helps me to break out of the immediate judgment withdrawal and allows me more to open into it. Like, okay, so since I do have the capacity for that, let me feel into how I could do that, what it would be like to do that, and what the feelings would be that drive that. And so I can feel into, by incorporating that into my being, I can feel into the root of it, and then feel and hear kind of a way to interact with it that may alleviate that a little bit more effectively than coming from a space of like, I would never do this, so let me tell you how it's done, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear like that. Rather than like, you need to look at this or you need to deal with this, sort of like a, we need to look at this and we need to deal with this, which, if I'm the other person, if you're just telling me something to do, I'm like, who are you to tell me? But if you're like, let's do this together, I'm like, okay, let's do it. And yeah, I'm wondering, like, from your life, what what are you working on right now, or what have you been doing? What are some actions that you take to really help or make a difference in what's going on in your circles?
So the things that I've been doing more recently, all with that same intention of cultivating and sharing a love for life and the people who live it. Um, One has been setting up in downtown Denton, which is not really a downtown, it's just a little square around the courthouse, with a Bluetooth speaker and doing just a pop-up ecstatic dance on Saturday mornings for an hour. And I have a little chalkboard, and so I write a question on the chalkboard. This last Saturday, it was, when do you most feel in love with life? And just dancing around, having a little question on my chalkboard. People can either come and talk about it, or they can just walk by and have that inquiry and see the what comes out at that point is like the expression of my celebration of being alive on that Saturday morning. Other than that, there have been a lot of ideas specifically around like how to, especially at this point in time, how to gather people together, because I think that the community aspect of this is the way to go. Like you've been talking about the small circles, the immediate friends, family, all of those things. And that to me represents a bottom up approach to change that I think is direly needed if we are going to change the way that we interact with each other. Um, and so for me, that looks like teaching yoga classes or meditation or breath work or just sitting down and having a conversation with somebody that I've never met before. Um, just making small connections in as many ways as possible, being open to being seen fully, where like I live in such a way, and I don't do this perfectly all the time, but in practicing living in such a way that the entirety of my inside, all of my deepest secrets and everything is just in my mind readily available to the world around me through just my way of being. And in such a way, inviting people into that same space to just live all out. What's the cliche, leaving it all on the field? The one that I heard recently was "Don't die with a song in your heart," which I really appreciated, just as like giving yourself fully all the time, singing your song with everything in you, so that at the end of the day or at the end of the hour, there is not anything in you that could have been done or that you wished would have happened that didn't. Just living fully in every moment.
Mm-hmm. And to me, that really is like embodying this work and like fully offering yourself to the world. And I'd like to explore, how does that actually help? Like, how does that make a difference? Because I believe it does, but I'd like to explore what difference that makes.
So do you want the woo-woo answer or a more a more cerebral approach to that question?
Well, just what comes up in my imagination is so here you are fully putting yourself out there, dancing ecstatically on the square of Denton, and there's a question on the chalkboard, and someone walks up and they're like, "Hey, who are you? Tell me about. I want to answer your question." And maybe they dance with you, and like maybe that person was having a bad day. Maybe they were down. Maybe they failed a test. Whatever. Maybe they got in an argument with their partner, and they come to you, and you offer them this experience of a dance, maybe a conversation around this question, but ultimately like your energy and your love, and this person walks away in a new headspace or new heart space, and they're like, wow, that guy was really cool, and I'm glad I went up and talked to him, and I feel actually pretty good now. And so maybe they go back to their house where their partner is, and they're in a happier, healthier space. So instead of like getting back into the argument, they're like, hey, look, I'm sorry for saying what I said earlier, and I just want you to know, like, I love you and you mean a lot to me. And then maybe that causes them to, instead of continuing to fight, to like feel really good together, and maybe from that space they're like, hey, what do you want to do today? And they're like, well, let's start that project we've been wanting to do. And maybe that project infects someone else with this good energy, and suddenly they've got this little group going on that's, you know, acting out of a space of love and wanting to leave the world a better place, instead of this just self-absorbed like anger that is, you know, perpetuating more anger and divisiveness and divisions in the world. So, you know, in my mind, it's like the butterfly effect. Like if you
Yeah.
can infect one person or a couple people with this, you know, unified love feeling, like it goes out and infects more and more people with that.
Mm. And I think I'm really glad that you touched on the just like elevating the feeling in someone, because that by itself, going from a place of like, you can even see it in people's posture. If somebody's sad or if they're afraid or something like that, and it's an immediate like closing down. You go to protect like the back of your neck or your heart. Um, and it's an actual like you're contracting yourself, you're separating yourself off more. It it goes like all the way from the subtlest part of your imagination, your thoughts, and like your narrative about what's happening and all of those things, all the way to the physical of just like I don't want to go out. I need to shield myself. This is awful. To if somebody is in a space where they just feel fantastic, then they have no choice but to share that. You cannot contain unbridled joy. You just absolutely cannot. Um, and that to me is like, if somebody can move into a space where they're a little heightened in their emotion, if they just feel really good, then in that way, they're going to affect the world around them in a way that's not from like the, oh, something's been done wrong to me. I need to protect myself and prevent that from happening again. Into like something excellent has happened to me. How does this spread? Um, and that to me is the basis of just how that movement goes. Like you said, the butterfly effect. But it's an innate quality of that. Like if somebody can have an experience either facilitated or if they can sit by themselves, like for me in the morning doing a meditation practice, like I'm going to sit here and I'm not going to get up until I'm absolutely enthralled with the idea of being alive right now. And if I get up with that feeling and I can move through the day with that, then anybody that I interact with, no matter what the interaction is, it's just going to be like that much more of a spread. Joy, pretty much any emotion, but specifically in my mind, joy and love and all those things, like a fire, just spreads uncontrollably if it is uncontrolled inside. And that comes back to the trust, just letting that flow through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I'm in that space of like, you know, just like that low, sad, maybe like, you know, even depressed energy, like everyone else becomes just a nuisance and like a bother and like get out of my way, leave me alone. You know, if I walk by someone on the street, I'm kind of like avoiding eye contact, and then I'm kind of like, okay, like I gotta go do this thing and I don't really want to do it. I'll do it anyways, and I'll show up to that and like, you know, just trying to get what I need and don't really care about anyone else. In fact, everyone else is annoying me. When I'm in that space of, you know, just loving life and like, oh my God, I'm so happy to be here. And I can't believe like how beautiful the world is and how much good energy I have inside of me. I'm like, yeah, I want to make a difference in the world. I want to go help people. I want to make sure this person's doing okay. I want to check in on like, you know, my sister. And yeah, for me, like that's really getting to the source of like, if communities were infected with joy and love, like I don't really care what happens to me. I just want to make sure everyone's okay, everyone's well
Mm.
fed, everyone is happy with how life is going. Uh, and so, yeah, I mean, I'm really in this conversation, I'm really seeing how the first step is really finding and creating, cultivating that space of joy and love and just high energy.
Mm.
I mean, that's really the first step in making a difference in the world.
And so I'm going to turn the same question that you asked back around on you. What are some things that you're doing? And then I would like to explore what some like long range, like the biggest ideas that you
Mm.
have for this are. But first, what are some actions that you take aside from just being an awesome human being on a daily basis that affects and elevates the world around you?
Yeah, I mean, I think this conversation is something I'm doing, like,
Mm.
and we really came to create this out of it. I mean, I think this idea was born right after that retreat that we led
Mm.
together, of like, that was amazing, and see all those other people sort of increase their joy. It's like,
Mm.
how can we collaborate more to infect the world with love? And this conversation, whether it's doing it or not, it's intended to just spread that high energy onto, into the space of anyone who might click the link on YouTube and watch
Mm.
this. Um, Also, something I've been doing, like, last week, is something I've been working on for a while, is starting a coaching practice. And the intention really is to be like, be there for people, invite people into like a relationship where my role is to listen to you, support you, infect you with joy, so that your life, so that you can go out into the world and live essentially a better life and make a bigger difference and leave more people
Mm.
infected with joy. So I've been, the thing I've been working on recently is like, how do I invite people into these partnerships? How do I make myself readily available for people and engage others in this partnership? And how do I make sure I'm not just doing it for myself?
Mm.
Um, because sometimes the ego does come in, and it's like, you know, is this really about them, or is this about you? And I
Mm.
can go down that rabbit hole sometimes. But I've, in the last week, I reached out to several people and just invited them into a conversation to ask them some questions about what would be valuable for them if I put together like a collective
Mm.
online group for people interested in exploring. And I talked to you about that. And I had a lot of like amazing conversations with people, just asking them about, what's going on in your life, what would really make a difference for you, what's important to you. And we left, every time I had one of those conversations, I left feeling very high, very like ecstatic. And I got a sense that they too left like with a thank you so much for having this conversation with me. We're like, I'm
Mm.
so happy I could help you by answering these questions. And so, yeah, I think, that's one example of what I've been doing that really feels like it is spreading joy. And then long term, yeah, I think continuing to create these partnerships where I'm calling it coaching, but really I'm just supporting and loving on people and listening to
Mm.
people. And, if there's something I can raise their awareness around, that's what I love doing.
Mm.
And seeing how people expand in that relationship, I just want to grow those relationships, invite more people into that space. And then, experiences, like collective experiences, retreats, and even like, a community of people who all share this intention to spread joy. Those are some visions I have, whether that's like, an intentional community of sorts, or just like getting to know my neighbors better, and like having collective meals or gatherings. Those are some things I'd like to do in the future.
That's awesome.
What about you? What vision do you have for making a difference in the world, in your life?
So similarly to what you talked about with your coaching, through teaching yoga and all of those things, just like recognizing through my own exploration that I do have a lot of tools that can be used for the elevation of a person's state. Being able to teach those things is, in my mind, like a really big one, because if there is an entire community, say like the entire city of Denton or something like that, where everybody was consistently practicing something, regardless of what it is, that gets them hyped to be alive and hyped to share that love for life and the people who live it every day, then that would be such a drastic change. So to me, like not only just involving myself with the community, but like empowering the community to empower themselves and the people around them in various ways. But one of the ones that has been coming up more and more recently is the idea, like I've loved doing the retreats with you. I've done just a couple of smaller retreats in various places, and they've all been that same kind of like everybody comes into this crazy strong collective space of love, and it's profound to see the opening that is possible in 8 hours to 3 or 4 days. And so for me, maybe establishing or starting some kind of tour to do like to involve all of the things that I like to do, to share that love, that joy, all in one place, and then have a container for people to learn how to do it for themselves over the course of 2 or 3 days. So like the ecstatic dance thing is awesome. I love playing music, so having an ecstatic dance, playing a show for people, doing some yoga classes, teaching some meditations, different kind of breath work, just have a huge assortment of practices, and all of these things can help you find the ones that resonate with you, find the ones that make you feel the best after you do them, and do them either on your own or get a group of these people together and do them all the time. I think that establishing those small groups is a really cool potential for rapid community growth. Because if you could go and do a retreat like the one that we did, and then you had 8 people from that retreat group that all lived in the same place or lived close together and got together and practiced some of those things like once or twice a week even, that could be like a really big impact on them and the community around them, just having that connection. As much as I would like for everybody in the world to sit in a big circle and sing Kumbaya together from pole to pole, I think that starting with retreats in a bunch of different places is definitely what sparks my high for life.
So what about for people who like I can think of all the people in my life who I would invite to these sorts of experiences. And then it seems like there's a lot of people who, if I gave them that invitation, they'd be like, that's not my thing. Like, I'm not into dancing or singing or stretching my body. Like, no thanks, dude. Like, how do you, or do you reach those who seem to be completely uninterested in this conversation and have just their own stuff going on, and they really, this stuff is just like, that's not me.
It depends on what this stuff is. Like, what is it that they have going on? What is it that they are interested in? Because I know like breath work type things. If say somebody has no interest in any of the spiritual dimensions of all of this and is just interested in getting better at lifting weights or climbing or running or just working, increasing writing productivity or getting better focus for their job or school or any of those things, like all of these things can help that too. But if somebody's genuinely uninterested, I have no interest in trying to convince them that feeling good is a good thing. But that said, if somebody has a specific interest that is outside of the intention of one of the larger retreats, then that would be a perfect container for either like our personal services, like how do I feel better and go about this without burning out, without losing focus, staying sharper, being able to do more. Even though that's not really my approach to things, that is, it's not any less valid and interest than any of the things that I'm offering. And then over time, I really think like if you have a community event and there's a whole, like, I don't know, 60% of the community that doesn't go and 40% does, and that 40% that's like regularly practicing with each other and like actually taking the things from the event into a daily embodiment of what it makes them feel, that I think that, like we talked about earlier, that fire will spread and people will see that 40% and be like, wow, there's a palpable difference, not only to the way that they act, but just to the way that it feels to be around them. And so what can I do? Because it doesn't take much, but what can I do to just boost that a little bit inside of myself? Because I see the way that it's impacting their relationships and their involvement with the community and their connectedness and just like all of the things that the stress relief. I know at the moment, anxiety, depression, and all of those things are huge issues in the entire world. And just like finding some ways to move those things out, especially if it involves community connection, is massive. And if somebody's not interested, that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I saw and heard in that is like, let's say there's this dude, we'll call him Joe, who's under a lot of stress in his job, and he's working 60 hours a week. He's a lawyer, and he just doesn't have time for self-care and breath work and yoga. Like he can barely get through the day as it is with his work, and he's got kids, and he's not working. He's got to take care of his kids and feed them dinner. He's just under so much stress. So like this kind of stuff isn't even on his radar. He's just trying to get through his day. And like, yeah, you may not, be able to reach him, but if someone in his office is like going to your group or tuning into your online conversation and like getting something from it, maybe they start like exuding more vibrancy. It might spark something with him. He might be like, they seem like they're doing really well. Like, hey, Sean, what's gotten into you? And then like it like indirectly, I do think it's with this community sort of networking effect, like the more people who start getting infected with joy, the more it'll just sort of integrate itself into all communities. And yeah, I mean, I'm like getting inspired by just a vision of joy spreading through community.
Mm. One of my biggest questions in this over the past couple of weeks has been in the realm of, so I've been reading, and I know I've talked to you about this already, for an addictions class, and I'm in the book In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts by Gabor Mate, and it depicts or at least the first part of it depicts a bunch of stories of people who live in kind of a drug slum in Canada, and like really just telling their background story of like what their childhood was like to bring them to this place, or like what their life experience has been and has taken them into this what seems like a really kind of dysfunctional but very tight-knit community that he works in. And one of my questions is, in addition to like how do you reach the people who are uninterested, how would you bring joy or invite somebody to see joy if they've never experienced it before, if that just hasn't ever been a part of their life experience? Would it be possible, or how would you invite someone who has just had an incredibly traumatic life into some kind of a very intimate and vulnerable experience like that? Because for some people, and they don't even have to be like heavily traumatized, that invite can be very scary.
Yeah, I actually listened to a story last night, and it was around like a world, it was suggesting a lot of people are like living their lives with imagined dragons out in the world. And so it's sort of like a thought experiment. Like imagine that you are in this fantastical world where there's dragons. There's like these, and not nice dragons, like these mean dragons that if they even like, spit on you, you will become infected with this toxic internal, like, I don't know, energy that's just breaking you down and making you feel like crap. And these dragons are all over the place. And so there's all sorts of strategies you would start to develop, whether it's like building up walls or like, being really scary so the dragons don't mess with you, or like, I don't know, just different strategies that you might use to ward off these dragons. And then that would cause you to act in certain ways and just sort of shut yourself into this box. And the way to break out of that is, I think, to realize like let's say then someone came along and could show you like these dragons aren't really there, they're just shadows. And then like in seeing that, it's like you could come out of your box, come out of your castle, and like start to step out into the world and carry yourself not in this like scary way, but in like this, like there's no dragons here to hurt me, and I can actually go do the things I've really been wanting to do instead of just like working so hard to protect myself from all of these dragons. So a lot of the times I feel like there are people out there who for legitimate reasons have worked their whole life to protect themselves from these perceived threats. And so to reach them, I think first sort of encapsulating that like container of love, and just really being like, hey man, like what's going on? Like, is everything all right? Or just being there for them, and showing up and like holding space for them without any necessary like agenda or trying to get them to do anything, but just like getting what's going on for someone is like a first step. And then if you can make them feel safe enough to open up just a little bit, then I think that's when like the window opens to suggest or invite them into the possibility of something other than, you know, a deep, dark fear or depression. And yeah, I mean, that's what came up for me. I don't know if it totally answers your question.
I don't know if it totally answers, but it definitely gives it at least a direction for it.
Mm-hmm.
Just interjected that question specifically because I know a lot of the time the communities that I'm around, like even though there is suffering and all of those things, I've never been involved often with communities that survive in like really deep poverty, or that are like decimated by addiction, or like the kind of marginalized, shoved out of the way communities that we have in this country and all around the world. And that's been like a big interest of mine recently, is like how with these things, as wonderful as they are, and as much as they can help all of the people around me, in addition to that, how do we go about helping the people who really need it the most, like people who are daily in and out in just a basic survival struggle, and that's been like big on my heart recently.
Yeah, something else that just came up for me is like, you know, I think this is where like a lot of altruism and like there's a lot of people out there who are trying to do this work. And I know a lot of times it can be, you know, when like a group of white Americans go to like, you know, Africa with this sort of desire to fix them, it manifests in just more dis-ease, or doesn't necessarily make a difference. And what just came up for me was like, maybe the first step, you know, if you had like a genuine, you or anyone else had a genuine intention to help a community that's so underprivileged and just riddled with poverty and addiction and all sorts of these other problems that maybe you have no awareness of, is like put yourself there, like go just immerse with that community, and get to know them. Like just feel out, like what is it like to be them, what does life look like for them. And I think from that space, you know, it'll become more and more clear what they need, or what, you know, they can tell you, they can directly tell you, like, this is like what I'm dealing with. And, you know, you can see like, okay, really they just need like a way to get food on their table, or really they just need some support in breaking free from this addiction, or really they just need someone to sit there with them and keep them company and listen to them and make them feel heard and loved. But I think the first step would be like getting to know them, because when we like try to help someone from an outside perspective, yeah, oftentimes doesn't work.
Mm. Getting intimately close to the people that you're helping before you try to do any help.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, I'm seeing how that's true for like any scenario, even if it's just
Yeah.
like, you know, your partner or your family. Like
Mm.
it's so off-putting for someone to like look at you from an outside perspective and say, this is what you need to do. And like, I'm here to help you. Like, whoa, you don't know what I'm dealing with.
Mm.
But to have someone like genuinely interested in getting to know you and then saying, look, like if you are interested, like I'm here for you and I can help you. Like, okay, yeah, like that sounds really good. And then from
Mm.
that space, working together.
Okay, so in that vein, what is, I think that this would be an interesting or fun kind of thing to input into this. What is one thing that could be like a call to action for us two and anybody else who watches this today? Just one thing that everyone could do today that would add a little bit of uplift, a little bit of connection. The thing that's come up a couple of times that you said that I
Mm.
love and will probably do is just like call somebody that I haven't talked to in a while. Say like, hey, how are things actually going for you? And just sit and have that conversation for a while. But whether it's that or something else, what do you think are a thing or several things that somebody could do?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I've heard in this conversation for me and a call to action for everyone else is like infect yourself with joy. Like whatever that may look like, whether it's, you know, meditating or writing or just going for a run or dancing, like whatever that is for you, infect yourself with joy, and then like you said, engage with one person
Mm.
and just share that energy with them, get to know them better, and go from there. Like start by just whatever it takes to make yourself feel really good. And I don't mean like ideally it's like an internal or healthy way to do that, not like a bunch of, I don't know, alcohol or something. Uh, and spread that joy. And that would be my call to
Mm.
action.
Perfect.
Like I just finished Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, and like I would love to see like a just like we're seeing COVID spread throughout the world. Like I would love to see joy spread throughout the world in that same infectious way,
Mm.
and like have a tipping point where a critical mass reaches like an elevated state and it just becomes like it spreads like wildfire.
Mm. And so it is.
Um, yeah. Any more closing remarks for this wonderful conversation? Would you like to maybe like just encapsulate what you've heard in this exploration and bring it to a close?
So what the things that I've gathered from this were that living fully with the flow of life's intelligence requires trust and faith, um, and that it seems to be inherent or at least somewhat actionable through intentional living, being responsive to the environment instead of reactive, and that those responsive states tend to be much more easier. The personal resilience tends to be higher in states of elevated emotion, some way to be infected with joy, and then arguments, even difficult conversations, difficult experiences just become easier to manage because they're not jerking you around. You're allowed to just sit and make the decision with them. And then the way to, or at least the basic principle of the way to put all of these true nature inquiries into action is through infecting yourself with joy, infecting yourself with the feelings that come along with digging inside and creating those kind of elevated feelings, and then just interacting with the world from that responsive place is the bottom up way of enacting change through compassion, joy, love, connection, all of those things. And then just taking, kind of in the same vein as intentional living, taking just one action, whether it's every day or every week, to infect yourself with joy and then intentionally connect with one person, whether it's over the phone or if you want to schedule a meeting or any of those things. Those were definitely for me, the big takeaways from today. Is there anything that you would like to add to that?
No, I think that's beautifully encapsulated, and just like to say, like, to anyone who made it this far in the conversation, thank you so much for your attention and your listening. And I hope this infected you with some joy. And if you have anything, any questions, anything you would like to add, please either leave a comment or reach out to us in some other way. And yeah, let us know what that is. And to you, Gage, thank you so much for your energy, your wisdom, your being, your presence. And as always, it's such a pleasure to be in this conversation with you. And I look forward to our next one.
I definitely can echo all of those things back to you. Thank you so much. I certainly feel infected after all of that.
As do I. Thank you.
Happy Monday. Love you.